Hello, everyone. Really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to join us here. To kick things off, my name is Logan, and I'm the Director of Client Solutions over here at Alloy. And my team is really focused on working with our large enterprise customers to get them stood up on Alloy and make sure they're getting value out of the tool. And we're really excited to have with us Glenn Lawse today, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain over at Ferrero. I've been working with Glenn over the past 12, 18 months, and it's been really a pleasure working with him and learning from him. So Glenn is responsible for driving an optimized balance between service levels, distribution cost, and inventory through continually improving supply chain operations. He leads a team of supply and demand planning, warehousing and distribution, and customer service and logistics. And before Ferrero, Glenn spent more than 15 years at Johnson & Johnson in roles of increasing responsibility in areas of supply chain management, supply chain strategy, manufacturing, network strategy, ERP strategy, and supply chain and IT and project portfolio management. So again, really excited to have Glenn with us and looking forward to spending the next 45 minutes or so with you all, talking through how Ferrero was able to bridge the gap between planning and execution with Alloy. In terms of our agenda, we'll start with some more details on the problems Ferrero was facing when reality deviated from plans. Then we'll walk through a specific example on how the process looks now, and then spend some time taking a step back and really reflecting on lessons learned and the ongoing journey to keep improving service levels, mitigate waste, and protect market share. We're definitely planning on leaving some time at the end to answer your questions. So feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A functionality in Zoom. If you can, make sure to use that Q&A feature rather than chat, and we'll make sure to leave time to address those questions at the end. So with that, I'll pass the mic over to Glenn, and we can get things started.
Thanks, Logan. Thanks for the introduction. I'm happy to join you today, tell you a little bit about Ferrero and talk a little bit about how we're using the technology to help us. Ferrero, your closest recognition may actually be the Ferrero Rocher pralines, which you see on the side, on the leftmost side of the screen here, commonly sold in many different configurations. But Ferrero actually also makes Tic Tac and Nutella, and recently we purchased a number of the confectionery brands that used to be Nestle, right? So now Raisinets, 100 Grand, Butterfinger, Crunch, are all part of our portfolio. We're headed towards about 1.5 billion in annual sales. It was 1.3 a couple of months ago when I looked at it, but the number keeps going up. We've got about 120 supply chain members on the team who are part of those functions that you heard Logan talk about. So planning, warehousing, distribution, customer service. We have 10 warehouses we're dealing with right now, and we have 5 different distributors. And I say distributors because we sell both directly to retailers, right? But we also sell to distributors who in some cases sell on to retailers. So we have a multi-echelon supply network down to our ultimate consumers. Ferrero USA is a private company, actually. It's a family business founded in Alba in Italy right after the end of World War II. It's the 3rd largest confectionery company in the world. Right, massive footprint in Europe. If for those of you who have had the opportunity to go there, we have distribution in about 170 companies and a big workforce, around a little bit more than 30,000 people across the globe. So last year, Ferrero group, its fiscal year was closed at about 10.7 billion euro in sales, right? So that's a little bit more like 12 or 13 when you look at it in US dollars. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about the gap, right? So reality never matches the plan. If we were all in a room, I'd ask people to hold their hands up, but I'm sure this is something we're all familiar with, right? Certainly the macro environment with the pandemic has had significant impacts probably to all of our businesses, right? And we don't really have much of an example or history to try and understand exactly what to do with that. But But the reality is, even outside of the pandemic, what we were looking to have Alloy help us solve is the fact that we're not always, we don't always get information fast enough or have visibility fast enough to make the right decisions, right? We have a lot of partners we work with. As you know, supply chain sits kind of in the center between all of your marketing and sales and finance colleagues. They all have their own bits and pieces of information, and trying to make sure you make the best decision with all that information is sometimes very hard to achieve. So typically you end up firefighting, right? You're trying to pull inventory, you've got inventory, it's in the wrong place, you've got inventory, it's the wrong code. The plans that you put, that you designed for to sell one set of products turns out to have demand on another set of products. So all of those things are very typical that I'm sure all of you encounter. Those are the kind of things that we were really struggling with, and we were looking for a good solution, right? So if you think kind of in simplified buckets, right? Between where is it that we plan? What is it that's on paper, for lack of a better term, right? In your ERP system, in your advanced planning system, right? You're looking at forecasted sales, forecasted shipments. Forecast is all based on there being some sort of rationality, right? And sometimes it's not so rational when you look at what actually happens on the execution side, when you get actual POs and actual scheduled shipments. And obviously you're dealing with individual items on a customer level. Sometimes in planning, depending on the horizon you're looking at, you may be looking at aggregated demand and supply. We tend to look at planning at a national level, right? Meaning we pay attention to certain customers, especially customers that might have a large, portion of our business. But really we're looking at the national demand overall for a product, whereas execution really depends on what each individual customer is looking to do. And ultimately, planning loves to hew, and we would all love to hew again to the rationality of consumption, but shipments don't always match consumption for all sorts of reasons. Those reasons could be good, they could be bad, but there's something of a reality, right? So some of the common gaps, right, when you think about this, right? We forecast a certain amount of sales, and yet your sell-in either over or under exceeds that, right? And there can be many reasons for that, which generally leads you to another set of investigations with data that you may or may not have direct access to, right? Forecasted versus actuals is how it plays out. When you look at weeks of supply means something when you think about it in terms of your aggregated demand or your demand even on a SKU level, but it means something different to the various customers who may be carrying or have different levels of in-stock inventory or on-shelf inventory, right? A lot of times if you end up in a position where unfortunately you don't have enough to supply the entire market, you have to make some decisions, right? And it helps to be able to have some view into what do your retailers have and what do you have, and how can you make the best decisions to suit the overall marketplace and ultimately to get the product as to the best in the consumer's hands the way you're looking for, right? At the end of the day, consumption versus shipment is really the big bucket that you're trying to solve. So this is kind of a generalized version of how it looks from our perspective, right? Presumably this is the same for many of you as well. You have retailers or partners, some of whom may have sophisticated external tools, maybe pushing out their information on sophisticated tools, maybe pushing it just to you in emails on a daily or weekly basis. And you have some retailers, of course, that maybe aren't that level of sophistication. The point is it varies wildly and they all speak their own languages. The best you can do is hope that you maybe have one or two people who are just fabulous in Excel and have nothing else to do all day, but to stitch all this information together to try and make sense of it, not only translating from one retailer's language into yours. And so think about it in terms of Walmart has its own SKU numbers, Target has its own SKU numbers, right? You have to translate those into the internal ones so that your planners know what they're looking at. But not only that, but you have to do that same translation for multiple partners and try and understand across. It's a very difficult task. And even if you had all of the Excel wizards you could hope for, it's really a daunting task. And ultimately then Excel becomes that tool where you're constantly looking at Excel to try and balance things. But the reality is all of your execution that you're managing is inside SAP. So you're disconnected from one piece to the other. And to the extent that you do not have a tool that helps sort of cover this, it becomes inefficient. It's very frustrating, right? So as you can imagine, these are the kind of systems we're dealing with, right? So we have an ERP system that is largely fenced with our own information, right? Our own manufacturing, our own DCs, our own forecasting, right? We have some consensus demand planning process. We have a data warehouse we use for forecasting. We do use some other tools around demand sensing to try and do the best we can from internally. But most of those, frankly, are using historical information and the best cleansed information that we're able to do with inside our walls, right? It doesn't represent to something outside. So what we're missing is the distributor planning, right? We have a significant portion of our business goes through distributors like McLean. Obviously, McLean as a distributor has their own plans for inventory levels, for inventory management, and for stock management. And they're in turn looking at talking to their customers who are your end retailers, right? That is not necessarily part of the same system. And the retailers themselves have their own planning. So for example, we actually do a lot of our business with Walmart via McLean. Walmart, of course, has their own planning systems as well. So you're thinking about it, you have 3 separate planning systems before it leads into the point where you're actually doing your production planning. It's a perfect example of the kind of thing, the bullwhip that can happen to you if you don't have really good sync on that information. Ultimately, then you have a ton of reporting, right? So you have BI reporting, you have Excel reporting, you have partner-specific reporting and POS reporting, but it's all separate spreadsheets, right? At best, maybe someone stitches together 2 of them once in a while for a deep analysis, but you can't do it on a daily basis or a weekly basis. It's simply not sustainable. This should be something I think is common for everyone. So
Perfect, perfect. Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
No. Here,
we like to have interactive conversations here, and so actually, as we go through here, wanted to simulate being in person best we can. So we wanted to do a polling question. So that should pop up on everyone's screen now. We thought it'd be interesting for people to plug in here. So if you take a minute or so and answer the question, that'd be excellent. And I know, Cindy, you were going to potentially post the results here. Yes, yeah, so not a surprising result. I think, Glenn, you can see the response here. Yeah.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know who that person is. And it only has one system. That's awesome. And also perhaps if you have any job openings. But it's as you can see, the challenge is fairly heavy here, right? And when we think our end-to-end supply chain, also the question really is what is your end? What are you thinking is the end? Is the end when it leaves your facilities or your distribution centers? And when you add in all your customers, that becomes a much bigger number, right? Great. I think that was illustrative of the kind of thing that we're challenged with and trying to deal with on a regular basis. So the glue is what we were missing, right? And we turned to Alloy to try and help us with this, right? And we have been working with them for a little bit over a year now on a number of our major customers. We don't have full coverage, but obviously we have a great starting point with about 50+% of where our shipping points are. It's key that Alloy really drives us, allows us to sort of bridge that gap between what we thought we knew within our planning system, what was actually happening, but then get information to explain it, right? What's actually happening real time in terms of key account forecast, visibility, in-stock levels, down to the very store level, right? So that we can see and be able sometimes to help not only have supply chain conversations, but sales conversations, right? So it's not purely a matter of saving inventory. There's also top line conversation you can drive with this. Having that sort of single source of truth, one place to go to be able to see all of this information was really key for us. So we want to talk a little bit about what Alloy does for us and sort of give you a sense for what we're doing. And we'll give you a couple sort of generic cases that are absolutely have a ton more detail in the background, or in a way we're sort of making it sound really easy what Alloy is doing here. They're doing a ton of stuff to harmonize and ingest data in the background that Logan will talk about a little bit later. And at the end of the day, the purpose for me is to have better information to make a better decision, right? Or even have a better discussion. Sometimes I may not be the sole decision maker on something, but but it's better if we can all talk about the decision to be made with my cross-functional colleagues, having the same data in front of us, as opposed to fairly typical conversations you think of in the past where your marketing colleagues might have consumption and your sales colleagues might have in-store levels at your retailers, whereas your supply chain folks are looking at maybe some historical or statistical based demand forecasts, right? We want to try and bridge all together. So let's take a look at a couple of these, what these examples are. So we had a new product launch recently, about a year ago at this point, right? A number of our products are actually not manufactured locally. They are, in some cases, manufactured in Italy, which obviously lengthens our supply chain and decreases our reaction speed significantly, right? So obviously it has to come from Italy. There's an ocean somewhere in the middle. Then it goes to a Ferrero DC. Then in some cases it goes to a distributor DC. From there it'll go on to Walmart. We're going to use Walmart in this specific example, right? And from a Walmart DC, it may then go to a Walmart retail store, right? And so as you can imagine, new products don't have a history, right? You're maybe modeling it after something else. And you have sales come to you and say that things going gangbusters, right? We need to make more product. We need to push more product right now, and push more product than something coming from Italy could mean an airplane, right? So this could be really expensive at some point in time. So you really need to understand, how do I know whether it's really a good decision to do it or not? Again, it's not that you're distrusting your cross-functional colleagues, but you really want to make it more on a view of data than view personally on a single person say so, right? Does this seem familiar? How often do you sort of see this in your businesses, right? We know that demand planning is always wrong, but how often do you come up with a major question, especially one where you have to make a decision that's going to commit company resources, right? More than just, I just need a little more this week, right? It happens fairly frequently for us. Let's see what everybody else says. Daily. Okay, well, everyone's between daily and monthly. Monthly seems like even a nice place to live. It's not the neighborhood I live in, but the reality is everybody's dealing with this constantly, because most of the time, even when you have a monthly one, I'm willing to guess that the decision that gets made there is not a one-day decision. It's multiple meetings and data and investigations. And obviously to make that best decision, you really have to see what kind of data you can deal with, right? What kind of data you might have out there. So let's take a look at what we used Alloy to do a little bit in this example, right? And so the graph you're looking at is capability that Alloy provided us, showing us actual shipments, which are the green bars, right? And these are in units, right? So they're quantity agnostic in that sense, right? Actual consumable cases. And the dotted line you see is actually Walmart's forecast. So at the time, on March 2nd and March 9th and March 16th, as we were rolling into Easter, as you can see, we were getting signals that we had to make a massive increase in production. And that was going to drive a tremendous amount of extended cost. To a certain point, your safety stock can maybe suck some of that up, but at a certain point, you obviously have to increase production. The reality was, when you even looked at Walmart's forecast, it was dropping back down to a normal level after the fact. And so this is a snapshot you're looking at that was taken right around March, somewhere between March 16th and March 23rd, right? You can see that Walmart's forecast has a peak, and it does seem to be well correlated with where their actuals have been in the past, right? But that actually it's going to slide as we come down out of this period. What actually happened? When we look at this a little bit later, here you're looking a little bit different. The line is a little bit different. The line is not actually forecast this time. It's actually how much of their pipeline that they were sitting on, how much inventory the retailer was sitting on. As you can see, we had to very quickly make sure that we provided them more inventory after that big spike. And then ultimately the numbers actually smooth themselves out, right? So sometimes, a single piece of information, which is something selling really well, or conversely, maybe unfortunately something appears to not be selling really well, right? Doesn't really tell you the full story. You really have to bring a number of pieces of information together to be able to try and get the kind of information and make a good decision. And Alloy gives us the ability not only to do that graphically, right, which certainly allows everyone to participate a little bit more easily in the discussion, but also to put it in whatever units make sense to people, right? So we can talk cases, we can talk units, we have a weird unit of measure inside Ferrero that's a weight unit of measure, something similar to kilos or tons. We can also look at it by individual retailer, and you can see where the stories are of who has the single greatest amount of inventory. When you take a look at this in the table below, it gives you a little sense that Walmart's pipeline is really quite powerful, but actually they aren't in too bad a shape right now in terms of what they're sitting on in terms of weeks of inventory. Maybe we're a little concerned about the amount of inventory that McLean has there, right? 35 weeks would seem to be like a very long, large amount of supply, especially when you're dealing with a food item that doesn't necessarily keep and is not designed to keep that long. The ability to see multiple pieces like this are exactly what we're looking to be able to do on a dynamic dashboard. And the thing that's important to remember about this is this updates generally as fast as your retailers can give you information. So in the case of McLean or Target or Walmart, where we can get it daily, we can see this daily without having to update the spreadsheet, redo the downloads, et cetera. Daily usage to be able to track something, customize what you may be looking at, and drive a better conversation either cross-functionally internally or potentially with your retail partners, right? Some of the other capabilities we can do, obviously, with this is you can share dashboards. So dashboards can be designed by a single person and then published to the rest of the group or a select set of the group. You can share an individual version of a dashboard, much like bookmarks, right? Functionality to say, hey, look, I'm seeing something over here, and I'm thinking I'm seeing this. Can you take a look? Are you seeing the same thing? Am I missing something? This is the kind of thing we want to be able to send to people, and we can use it. You can just pop it out in their email, and they can see it the same way. And if they have access to Alloy, they can link back right in and see the same charts that you're looking at. They can drill down, drill up. They can change the time series, or change perhaps the set of buckets that they're looking at things in. Right. The idea is that the context is easily there. It's updated daily. I can customize it. I can drill down to where I think a problem might be, and then quickly share that with someone who I'm working with on the tool. So another capability and functionality which we really like, and honestly we have not explored enough. I'm teeing that up for Logan, so now he knows that the next time he'll talk to me. We're not exploring this enough right now, is that the ability to set alerts for yourself, right? So as you can imagine, we're looking at things that are overselling or underselling forecasts. We can set thresholds on that. We can set a generic threshold for the entire business, or we can set a threshold at individual brand level, individual SKU level, whatever, individual retailer level, whatever seems to make sense for us. And that will allow us to preset the things that we look at or need to pay attention to on the way in. I can imagine all of you do some sort of planning by exception. And probably wish that you could plan even more by exception than you do now today. This is the kind of ability that helps us to be able to do that, right? And those alerts can be something that the first thing you see when you come into Alloy, you can be notified via email, you can notify a group of people. The functionality is there to be able to sort of help you make sure it brings your attention to what's really important or what you've designed to be important. And if that changes the next month, you change what the alert looks like, right? So at the end of the day, he said, okay, Glenn, this is really great. I like that, and those are cool. But what's it doing for you, right? How's it helping you improve your performance, decrease your costs, improve your efficiency? So ultimately, we want to talk a little bit about what we're doing to do this, and we continue to explore. And this is a journey, truly. We're not there yet. We have achieved certainly some benefit, but we continue to see more benefit and more use cases. And every time we see that, that increases our footprint and how we can really deliver on our efficiencies. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Take a look. Here's a couple key top priorities, right? This one, I believe you could pick a couple items on this one. What are your top priorities? I picked 3 only because I didn't want to pick all 8. Let's see what the results tell us here in a moment. Aha, increasing forecast accuracy is the leader on this one, and I'll tell you that's the single probably between that and actually for us reducing waste and spoilage. Again, perhaps more of an issue for food companies that do not have a long lifetime in their products, right? But for us, increasing forecast accuracy and reducing waste are the key things we're going after right now. The ones we're looking at the next year truly are around reducing lost sales and improving on-shelf availability, right? I think that, we talk about some of this. This is really a lot of supply chain terms more than anything else, but there's really the one thing I would encourage you to try and think about as well is there's an entire set of sales applications here that maybe is just not natural to our language in supply chain. Because it's not purely about a manner of you see a lot of reducing here. It's also about improving and adding to the top line as well. That looks fairly familiar to me. So what do we want to do in terms of improving service levels? Improving service levels certainly for us is an important thing. I'm sure it's important for everyone. The ability to understand inventory levels at our key customers, at the customers that drive more than 50, 60, 70% of our demand for any given item, the ability to have that immediate visibility into their inventory is one level beyond anything we've had in the past. Maybe in the past we've used IRI, maybe we used something else that told us POS generically at the end state, but to not be able to tell what's happening on that entire supply chain, up and down that supply chain really puts you at a disadvantage. Having that visibility, super important to us. In fact, early on when we were considering our business case to this one, my finance partner, who was naturally challenging me on the investment, said purely having this visibility alone and having that visibility beyond just the sales group, right? Beyond just the sales team is something that's already helped pay itself off, right? So it's not just inventory position, it's also understanding your allocation, right? So we are, for better for worse, and maybe a lot of you, if you are contributing to this, I thank you. Nutella during the pandemic has been selling like hotcakes, right? We have been selling more than we can possibly make. And as a result, we are in the good position of having to make a supply constrained decision about who's going to get it when we can provide more information. It really helps so we can see even a better view and dig down deeply to see who they're all ordering, but who really is sitting on the supply and who has zero or major in-stock problems at the retail level, right? Obviously, better managed product launches as well too. When you think about it, we talked about this in the example earlier. The reality is you've got products that you're basing it off of some historical curve and some other product, and we see that the information that comes back to you is not nearly fast enough in many cases to be able to make the right decisions to ensure that after pipeline, as your POS starts taking off, you're in the right position with neither too much nor too little, right? So what has Alloy done for that? Again, it's helping us connect these workflows, helping us connect these inventory levels, seeing those real-time inventory positions. And it's truly real time. I mean, I have to underscore that. We may have had availability to some single partner internet on a daily basis to see something, but no one had the bandwidth to go in and do that work manually, right? To be able to connect a little bit of the demand signal and store level inventory position. And honestly too, we tend to say Walmart, like Walmart's one place. Walmart is many stores and distribution centers. So the reality is we can sometimes say, yes, Walmart needs product, but only these certain areas of Walmart, areas of the country perhaps, because they're the ones that have both the highest ring, right, the highest sales turn, and also the ones with the biggest inventory or in-stock problems. So setting those and using alert capability and using the email sharing capability have all been things that we're using Alloy to help us with. It's not just about service levels though for us. As I mentioned, it's about mitigating waste. So we're a food product. Ferrero Rocher, as you remember, the small pralines that are about the shape like a golf ball size, they do not improve with time. They are not wine, okay? The reality is it's very important for us to move through those kinds of things very fast because we want the customer to have the best experience with it, right? Unfortunately, in many cases, they're also made quite a long way away. There's times where it is difficult to triangulate between what consumption is telling you, what sales are telling you, sales as in your sales team, who's tasked, by the way, with continuing to drive the top line, right? and what your actual shipments are telling you, right? It's very rare that all of those line up perfectly. And the reality is, if you think about food, and many of you probably have seasonal products as well. We have some seasonal products, right? We make things in the shape of an Easter bunny for Easter, right? We make things in the shape of a Christmas tree for the holidays. Those items do not have a ton of demand the day after the holiday is over, right? So it's ideal to be able to make sure you're monitoring that in and out. And so Alloy is helping us there. Again, watching our POS visibility, watching not only after the event has happened, but perhaps on the way into the event, saying, where is it? What do I maybe have to talk to a retailer about activating taking some action to improve movement of the product beforehand, right? Can I offer a markdown or something in the last week or two because I don't see like that it's moving well enough? For us, this has been really important for us to be able to achieve this, and it's been critical to have the Alloy information to help connect those dots, not only provide, again, the real-time inventory and turn information, but also to connect the dots about where it is that I'm likely to have spoils, and can I do something? Can I work with that retailer earlier to move the product faster, maybe with sacrificing some amount of profit, of course, but at the same time saving from having to destroy something at the end of it, right? Very important for us. So obviously, these things don't all start out on day one, right? Logan here is very, very capable. I did expect much of him on day one, but honestly, there's just as much learnings and equally important, like any technology implementation, to align your people and process internally, right? That is a challenge that we've been facing, and we continue to work and drive on. So change management is key. I don't need to tell you this, because that line could have been stolen out of any other presentation that you saw at Gartner or somewhere else, right? Change management is key in starting small and gaining traction, then expanding. This one is important to me, because I think those of you who have been looking at any technology investments today, we're in a good world for that, right? Because 10, 15 years ago, there was no such thing as a small investment to try something and prove it and then expand it, right? You had to think ERP, right? You couldn't just do a little ERP. You had to do all of it, and it was a 3-year payback. The idea here was for us to have very clearly defined use cases, apply the solution to those use cases, learn as we're going, but also then continue to look for new use cases as we expand, right? The other one was honestly bring sales leadership in early. I'm going to tell you that I think this platform has more value to my company at the moment for sales than it does in supply chain. It has tremendous value for supply chain, but supply chain value that I have tends to be more around prevent, and prevent is not a good business problem. You want to add or increment, which is truly a sales problem. And so those are the things that we have to do. And I think bringing them in early is a big deal. I will tell you that this goes hand in hand with change management as well. You're probably familiar with the fact that a lot of times visibility makes people nervous, right? If you're providing visibility to everyone for data that usually only a small group of people control, they feel a little bit about the lack of control. They feel a little bit nervous about whether your data is right. All of that you have to approach early on and find the key partners who can help you prove that case and prove that benefit, because the benefit is absolutely there to be had. So I think I gave you a bit of a sense for how Ferrero is using this. I'll let Logan talk a little bit more generically about the capabilities of the Alloy platform.
Thanks a bunch, Glenn. Again, really appreciate it. And now before we get into Q&A, we did want to just spend a couple of minutes getting everyone a high-level overview of Alloy, so you can all get a sense in a bit more detail of how it works. So just one slide here for the group. This schematic really summarizes how we think about the product. And so if we look here at the base, Alloy's data platform collects data in real time, to Glenn's point earlier, across lots of different sorts of data sources. And then we harmonize all of that data into a single model. So we can get data from brick and mortar retailers, we can get data from e-commerce channels, direct to consumer, distributors, 3PLs, and this is all based on existing integrations and data relationships that Alloy has. So we've got over 600 reusable integrations, and that number keeps growing. And that's in large part because it's been a focal point of our organization since we're really purpose-built for consumer goods brands. And so once all that data is captured from your ERP, from your point of sale data, from your distributors, and integrated, our modeling layer uses the data to create a network map of your supply chain. So we're modeling the relationship between your partners and their locations and your locations, ultimately so that you can trace your products all the way from your production facility through your internal distribution centers, through distributor DCs, all the way down to stores at the point of sale. And then as I'm sure most of you can appreciate, modeling that complicated supply chain network isn't an easy problem to solve. So first you've got to be able to model at the product level. Lots of different product identifiers, potentially different case conversions. You have different product attributes and product categorizations. And that all needs to be brought together in a single sort of data model. Then you've got to be able to model that location network. So this would include your ship lanes. So it could be that depending on the product, it goes through a different lane in your network. What do your lead times look like? Is it coming from Italy? Is it coming from far away or close? What are your location attributes to make sure you've got a meaningful sort of network map? And then lastly, we recognize that the time granularities matter a lot. So again, depending on where data comes from, you're gonna have different fiscal calendars, you're gonna have different fiscal weeks, different time granularities. Ideally, we can get daily, but sometimes it's weekly sorts of data. So how do we make sure that we can compare apples to apples in that network over time? So that's really how we think about modeling this data. That last sort of data layer in our data platform enriches that data. Once it's all integrated and modeled, we're able now to enrich the data so we can compute and simulate metrics, give you out of the box dynamically calculated weeks of supply. We can show you where there's potential for phantom inventory. At any point in your supply chain, we can project inventory shortages. We can illustrate to you the sales that you've lost from product not being on the shelf, so you can better understand what is true unconstrained demand at the point of sale. And really lots more of these sorts of insights that can help supply chain folks find and resolve the most impactful and important opportunities. Plus, once all that data is together, we make sure we preserve it in a format that's useful for any user. So you can toggle from the Walmart language to your own nomenclature to McLean really easily. So depending on who's consuming the data, we can make sure we're speaking the right language so everyone really can understand and take action as necessary. And then lastly, on top of that data platform, we've got two key applications for all of this sort of updated, integrated, and modeled data. So we've got analysis, and this provides users an ability to customize dashboards, alerts that we've shown, run experiments, really to deliver business insights. And then we also have forecasting, which generates a demand forecast at that point of sale and translates it into a shipment plan. So hopefully this, the 2 minutes we've taken here gives people a little more meat on the bones to contextualize what Alloy is all about. And although we do have specific solutions for sales teams and supply chain, we recognize that different use cases, people will use the data differently. We are a company that really believes that you need a data platform, a single source of truth to help bring together cross-functional groups to be able to solve problems, because most issues and opportunities do require teams to collaborate together effectively. And so if I know we're more than happy to kind of dig into this more with folks on the call, but do want to make sure we leave some time for the Q&A. I know we. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Glenn.
one question right off the bat from Rob joining us. The question was, how did you get your IT team to work with you in exploring this technology? So I actually think that's a great question, because where finance isn't your only stakeholder in getting the money, right? In some cases, it's around IT. I will tell you that I have a particular strategy that I follow in this. The reality is our IT team, and I worked with our IT team on this, and there were a number of, I'll call it common evaluations we had to do. There's been some vendor evaluations, some sort of cybersecurity evaluations, of course. But we went in saying no integrations to ERP. The minute you say no integrations with ERP, for most IT folks, they watch 95% of their work disappear. I do that very specifically because for a couple of reasons. Number one, the fewer number of integrations I can drive to and still start to achieve the benefit, to achieve what I'm looking for, the lower my opportunity cost on the way in, right? So if I don't have to spend, I don't know, $100,000 on some interfaces with ERP, and don't let that number scare you. That's me thinking of consultants. I know that Alloy makes these connections much more simple. If I don't have to spend it, if I don't have to engage that on them, at this point, they become more of a disinterested observer, as long as the technology meets your information technology and security requirements more than anything else. So I don't know if that directly addresses your question. What I have done, however, is continue to make them part of the process when we're evaluating or reevaluating or renewing contracts or adding capability. We are at the point this year where we actually may start considering some more direct feeds. We do provide a little bit of information, things like material master information. We provide ad hoc to the Alloy team on a monthly or as needed basis, because honestly, while it does change quite frequently, in most cases we're able to survive with that being done manually. It makes more sense for it to be automatic, and between that and some of our inventory levels are things we're going to explore here more recently. Simple answer is start small, because that enables you, honestly, and Logan's got to put earmuffs on for this one, bigger earmuffs. If it doesn't work for you, you haven't spent nearly as much, right? So part of this is making a good business case and decision to try a technology, see it, that it works for you, and then evaluate as you continue to see benefit. What I can tell you is this year, we're just completing our renewal process right now, and we did a very robust exercise that Alloy helped us with on what the value could be, right? And without getting into numbers, what I can tell you is the value at a very limited use case, purely around spoils, for a small, I think 2 or 3 customers alone, forget the rest of the customers we may be working with, was probably 7 or 8x what it costs for us to be able to continue to use this platform. So the value is absolutely there.
Awesome. Hey, Glenn, actually, Mark has a follow-up question to that comment. If there's no ERP integration, where does the master data come from? I think that, although it's not the most, I think maybe add some clarity there on.
Well, there's 2 things, and so I will highlight. I will start by, I think, highlighting maybe Alloy's capabilities. Some of the information that they will ingest information, whether it be from your retailers or whether you provide them information. We provide them some daily transactional information, right? Some daily and some weekly. There are reports that get run every day in the background anyway, and we just add them to a distribution list. And what they've been able to do, and it's kind of smart when you think about it, is they've, in cases where I haven't been able to provide them a unique, perfect master data solution, they've sort of deduced it from the ongoing files that I send them, right? So we send regular files about our own shipments on a daily basis, right? And those files happen to contain customers, customer numbers, materials and material numbers, and brand information, right? So the following materials all in a brand. What they do a little bit on the side is they deduce from the information you're sending what your set of materials is. They can also use that as a signal to me for where I do provide master data to say, hey, the following 10 items are cropping up that I don't have your full master data. So it is a good question. I would tell you that it's something that we worked specifically with Alloy with, but it's a capability they use based on the fact that they're ingesting all this information in the first place. They can do a lot of deductions in the back.
And I think to add to that, Glenn, we have a very flexible data model. So ERP data is coming into Alloy. although it is in a less direct fashion at Ferrero. And I think that gives us some optionality in terms of, are we going to integrate directly with MD04 in SAP, which is an option for us as a pre-built connection, or are we going to sort of piggyback existing sorts of reporting and extracts that are already being shared? And in the case here, to make it lighter touch from an IT perspective, we're flexible in how we capture that data, whether there's inference happening through the data model to get as close as we can, or hey, let's actually consider bringing in different sorts of channels. So yes, ERP data absolutely is in the application for Ferrero, but direct ERP integration, we can be flexible in how we think about capturing data there.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer to that. I think we got another question about did you or how do you restructure your organization to use this tool? I don't know that we found that we had to restructure necessarily. And again, still a journey. We're still this year, I would tell you, we're looking at new user groups, if you want to think in terms of functions or departments, right? So last year was mostly supply chain. Maybe I'll call it 75% supply chain, 25% sales. It is rapidly, and now it's probably 50-50. Going into next year, there may be some folks in marketing who are looking at this, or trade marketing. So we haven't necessarily restructured, but I think the real key is that the same information has different value to different functions for different reasons. I know that seems like a mouthful, but the point is, the things that I wouldn't know how to describe, how to set up an alert for potential lost sales. That's something a salesperson can work with Alloy on to design. I know how to talk about where do I look at inventory imbalance within my retailers, right? Or where do I look at end-to-end inventory and understand it? So the key is that I don't know necessarily you have to restructure. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's really key for each function that engages to speak with Alloy specifically about the kinds of things that they're interested in looking at, because their language, much like the language of different retailers, their language is going to be different from sales to supply chain to trade marketing to consumer research folks, right? So we have found that the important thing is that, and it's actually a good thing, because the tool doesn't have to be this everything to everybody. It can be X for one set of people, Y for another set of people, but the reality is it's all running on the same data in the background. I know we also got a question here about what is the minimum percentage of coverage of POS data. I feel like I asked Logan that question when we talked about this, when we were looking at originally exploring a partnership with Alloy. And I now think that the answer is different than what I was looking for. Of course, I was looking for something like, well, if you don't have 75% of your sales, maybe it's not enough. I don't think that's the case. What we have found is that it depends on your use case. So the use case that we talked about spoils earlier, for us, there's 2 or 3 customers that drive, let's call 75% of that, right? And those 2 or 3 customers maybe is only 15 or less % of my business, maybe only 10% of my business. So, again, it's a big difference. So the reality is, with those 2 customers alone in that use case, I get value out of it. And that was the one I told you was 6 to 8x addressable kind of risk on those 2 alone. And so you don't really need the 80%. Now, if you want to make sort of big sweeping end-to-end choices, obviously the more coverage, the better. The simple answer is we had a certain amount of coverage on our first year, and this year we're going to expand to 3 or 4 more retailers, which is going to increase what our coverage is. I would tell you we ran through the first year with probably, let's call it 50% with respect to our sales, and still plenty of value. Plenty of value. Great question, though. It sounds like we have some more questions coming through, but we're running short on time here because we're right on the limit. So, Logan, are we going to take these down, get back to these people?
Yes, you can keep feeding in the Q&A. I think we want to be mindful of folks' time here. Again, really appreciate everyone taking time out of I'm sure a busy day and to have this conversation. Glenn, thank you so much. Really appreciate the insights and the presentation here. But yeah, if there are additional questions, we're happy to stay on the line as well. But otherwise, very much appreciate everyone joining us, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. Thanks, Logan.
All right.